Welcome to Tenessa Talks. I'm Tenessa Audette. On this episode, we are going to dive into who you should be hiring to represent you in government. Before we get started, make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, and add a 5-star review. That would be awesome. Hope you enjoy the show.
In our last episode, we touched on what makes America great. And this episode, we're going to dive into policymakers. Tenessa, I've heard policy is the problem. So how do we hire the right policymakers?
Yeah, and I think that's actually probably the best question to ask is who are we hiring for these positions? Because when we think about electing them, we're like, oh, who's available to us and who the criteria is kind of wild of how we're picking these people. But when you think about who you're going to hire for somebody, you want them to have great experience. You want them to have some product knowledge, maybe for the industry or for what it is that they are moving into. Is it industry specific? So if I'm going to hire somebody to paint my house, obviously it'd be a painting company or somebody that at least works in construction. There's a lot of criteria that we look at when we hire people, but it feels like when it comes to electeds, it's just so haphazard. It's so haphazard that oftentimes, as somebody who ran campaigns for 10 years and helped get people elected and sort of went through the process of developing like the messaging for people and who do you want to be and how do you want to serve and what do you want to see happen? But oftentimes what gets absolutely lost is, do these people actually understand the principles of government, which is what we were talking about? Do you understand how economics works? Do you understand the role of government? And that amount of knowledge and understanding, I think, is almost never considered when we're trying to hire people for office, when we're electing people to office. So often in our last conversation, it kind of came back to, okay, so then who should be doing what, right? Or who do we have that's leading in this, and who have we hired, and who are these elected officials that we have, and what it is that they're doing, and who can fix this, and that is legitimate because that is really all that you're left with when you have a problem. Is okay, well then who's going to fix it, right? So any issue that you have, this is the equivalent of who is your manager. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like who is your manager, and who can get me your supervisor, right? So we have issues in government. So we have issues as a community. We have issues as a state. We have issues federally, okay? And then you have your government within that, and you have the people that are there that are making those decisions. And I think who we hire, who we elect is so important. And you can look at who it is you've hired and who it is that you have elected, and you can find where a lot of the fault is. And I'm a Republican, and as a Republican, and I think this probably goes true for Democrats as well, but I'll just speak for my own self and my own party. We have some strange sacred cows when it comes to hiring people that I don't think serve us very well. Have you noticed?
Yeah. In fact, I think that would be my biggest criticism is, at least on a local level, it's easy to kind of dig in. You know your candidates probably because you know them from Trader Joe's or the neighbors, or you find out they do business with other people. Or it's easier to find out the nuances within a political leader or potential candidate than it is when you look at the ballot and they're selected for you based on your party, or they're running a third party or whatever it may be. It's harder to find out about them.
Yeah.
And then you're like, well, why did they win the nomination of their party?
Right.
What makes them great?
Right.
Etc.
So I wish that it was even that. I wish we vetted in any way, shape, or form. But oftentimes it's the name. It may be a sign that you saw. It may be that there was a yard sign in somebody else's yard. It could be that you got a mailer. It's usually very selected information that's given to you. Worse, it's an attack ad that just makes you not vote for that other person.
Which are so effective.
Right.
Which is so sad.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's just, we can talk about that too.
that's
But like,
sidebar.
the thing is that think about like if somebody told you that you should buy a house. I mean, the largest purchase that you're ever going to make. And they're like, let me describe it to you. Let me tell you about it. Or you saw a picture of it.
Right.
Like nobody's going to make this huge purchase without somebody that they trust or walking through it or maybe trying to see the inside of it. Or I mean, like these are big decisions. And I think oftentimes with candidates, we are picking somebody based on the strangest things. Like, for instance, what I hear all the time is, "I don't wanna vote for a politician." Okay. Okay. Okay, that literally means that you don't want to hire somebody for the job who's done the job. Like, in what other field would you ever want to hire somebody who has never, ever worked in that field, who has never, ever had any experience with how this system is run or how this industry is run or how the store is run? Like, we would that seems ridiculous, but we say things like, "We don't wanna hire politicians," and I will give you an example. If you today got to choose, do you want Trump version 1 or Trump second? Now, obviously, if you're a Democrat, you feel differently. But if you're a Republican, you're like, do you want his first iteration or a second iteration? Okay, so what's the difference? The difference is he has 4 years of experience. So he has 4 years of actually in that job training of being like, whoa, this is not what I thought it was going to be. This is an issue. Well, I think the same thing when you're talking about going into the state level or into the federal level. We're talking about the big leagues. We're talking about, have they been in the minor leagues? Have they even played in high school? Like, have they ever played the game? And if it's no, why in the world did you draft somebody to play in the major leagues that has never actually played the game? That you're inviting problems.
I think that is where maybe I would struggle and where my mind takes me is we would say, or I've heard people say, politicians are corrupt. I don't want to vote for a politician because automatically you're corrupt, right? That connotation. And so the idea of it even being a game, unpack for me what skills are needed to be effective in government.
Well, yes. Okay, so let's talk about that. So if you're a politician, you're corrupt. And if you're a politician, like,
You have to
you're
do
the
the good job.
establishment,
Right.
we
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
like you,
automatically you're a part
and
of
it's
the
like,
problem.
okay, well, then you go pay attention to what they've done. So if you've seen somebody play in high school, if you've seen, okay, let's just say you've seen them, you're looking for a baseball player and they play football and they're fast and they've got good hands, which means they have good hand-eye coordination. Okay, great. Then maybe you have them try out for the team their freshman year because you're like, you don't know the game yet. Like, you don't know the game, but you're an athlete and you've got good hand-eye coordination. And I think you could pick this up. And then you sort of develop them and maybe they get good at it. Maybe they don't.
Right.
But you see something in them that you think would be good. But then you kind of test that out at a lower level. Have them run for the school board, have them run for city council, and how they handle the pressure of those positions. Do they do what everybody else does? Are they persuaded in the room by 20 people screaming at them? Do they actually go against principle, right? So it's very easy to be principled when there's no pressure.
Yeah.
But in the midst of that pressure, do they succumb to the pressure or do they stand on principle? And can they articulate that?
So you're saying
principle?
integrity.
Well, no,
Right?
I'm
Like-
actually just saying, do you even know what you believe?
Do you know what you believe?
Okay.
Yeah. Are you?
This is okay. What we talked about. If you didn't watch the previous episode, you really should, because really, what we're talking about when we talk about America and we talk about the American system of government, is you are talking about what government does, separate from what the economy does.
Right.
And if you don't understand that you should not be meddling in the economy, or in as limited a fashion as possible, like, you create boundaries within those industries, but you don't dictate to those industries what they're going to do. You don't overtax them. You don't overburden them. You don't step into and forcing them to move in whatever ways that their market is not actually calling for. Like, I think where we need to look at people is, what is their educational background as far as how much have they familiarized themselves with understanding what the system of government is that they're in and why it works the way that it works and what the principles are of that. And I don't actually think that people know that. I think that they believe this is not that hard. This problem is potholes. I'll get on there and I'll make sure that we put our money towards potholes because somebody maybe is corrupt and they're not doing it. But then you find out very quickly that's not at all how it works. That is not at all how the formula is. You only have this ability to do this. You have this ability to do that. And your biggest problem is at the state. So what you'll hear over and over and over and over and over is the problems at the state, if you're in local government. However, it's in local government that you'll learn how the system works. You'll learn, what is your responsibility? So what is a county supervisor's responsibility? What is a city council member's responsibility? What is a school boards, you're gonna if you're in office, you're gonna learn because you'll understand what's coming to you, what you can make decisions on. The community will say, "Hey, fix this," and you're like, "Oh, that's actually," so you'll ask, "Can we fix that?" They'll be like, "No, that's not our jurisdiction." And so you'll sort of learn as you go in these smaller roles where you are one person on a council, not the governor, not the president. And that is legitimately where most people are like, I want to be the boss. I want
Right.
to fix it. I want to go
Yeah.
to these levels of power with no experience, with no understanding of how it
Yeah.
works. And what you have is a situation where you get people into office and they have to rely because they don't know anything. They have no education. Not no education, but no education on government. They have no practice of how government actually works. And they get into office and they have to rely on a lot of other people that have agendas and that have no accountability because they're not elected. And they're telling you that you should do something. And then you have, a situation where like Ronald Reagan ushered in CEQA, which is a 4-letter word in California. It is a 4-letter word. It has literally stifled and added costs to any type of building that happens in California, where you build, how you build, when you build. All of that has absolutely fundamentally skyrocketed in price because of CEQA. That's Ronald Reagan. Then you look at, and why? Because he's an actor. Because, he got better because he got experience and he was able to do better. We liked him better the more experience that he had. And you have something like Schwarzenegger where, you have this whole fee state that has been created in California under a Republican governor. Why? Because he didn't know enough. He really didn't. He had a good heart, good intentions, and no education about how this should all work. And because he didn't come up in it and understand how unions work and understand how the negotiating was going to work and understanding that decisions today, you can make them effective late. All of these types of things that you learn when you're actually in government, not understanding how that system works, put you at a huge disservice, and it actually harms the people because you may be thinking, I'll do a bipartisan issue, but their intent for that bipartisan issue is CEQA, where now you can't build anything and, you're going against that. And then people say, well, that was Reagan that did it.
Yeah.
So don't complain about it because it was a Republican. It's like, no, I don't care what party you are. Bad decisions are bad decisions. Bad policies are bad policies. And I don't care who created them. We need to stop them when they're actually doing the opposite of what they were intended to do, which just people don't have the political will to do because they actually don't understand it.
Tell me about what is required. Really, okay, go back nutshell. You mentioned the different areas of influence: school board, city council, supervisor, etc.
Experience.
Explain what levels of spheres of influence are in each area.
Oh,
Give
sure.
me like a blanket rundown nutshell, because I feel like I've seen people run for office for positions that have that are not connected to anything they could solve.
That's such a great example. Okay, so I'm sure that you've all seen like somebody run for supervisor and they're like, we're going to fix, parental rights in schools. And they have like nothing to do with that. They don't make any decisions that are going to fix that. But they're running on that because the emotion of the community is very upset about that. And so they know, well, maybe they don't know that they can't do anything. It's hard to tell sometimes. But we're talking about an area that they don't actually vote on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It would be like I remember I ran somebody's campaign. They were running for city council and somebody asked if they were pro-choice or pro-life. And you're like, they don't make any decisions on that. That's kind of wild. But they were like, well, but they could eventually run for something else. I'm like, okay, that's a good point. So you don't want to get them onto the minor league team if you then don't want them into the majors. So, okay, I can understand that. But like a lot of times your jurisdiction depends on what you're running for. So there can be some overlap, but largely the responsibility is by what funding you have and then what you're able to have jurisdiction over. So federal government, you have your senators and your congressmen. That's your legislature. You have the president, and you have the Supreme Court and all of that. You're largely voting for president. You're voting for your congressional people, your legislators. So anything that's federal, anything that touches federal, if you have a problem, you call your own congressman. Now, remember, this is another weird one.
Yeah.
In Congress's approval rating is like 9%, 8%, 9%, which is abysmal, right? Like nobody
likes
hates
them.
Congress.
Yeah.
But people like their own congressman,
Every time.
right? So it's bizarre to me that you can think that something's going to change with something not changing. And if you you can have a congressman, if that congressman is attentive, that congressman shows up, that congressman is doing things that you are in alignment with, you see their votes, they're explaining their votes, they're interacting with the community to say, here's what I'm doing, here's why I'm doing it, here's what I'm doing, here's why I'm doing it. Great. But we all know other congressmen from other areas where that doesn't happen. No, people don't even know who their congressperson
Or
is.
they've been in Congress for however many years.
Or not.
Yeah.
Or not. They get in there. I mean, I've seen the man on the street for some of these other people in other places because we're not going to talk about our own.
Yeah,
Of course,
yeah,
we all love
yeah,
our own.
yeah.
But like, you have AOC and that kind of stuff, and you go to the man on the street and you're like, what do you like about what they're doing? And they may or may not know that that's their congressperson. And you're like, it's such a weird disconnect. That's like, we would rather do what we know than risk the unknown. And in the absence of knowing how to make a good decision, people are likely to make no decision. So they're going to keep it the same because they're just not sure. They don't want to take the risk. They don't want to take the gamble. Like, I'm not trying to disrupt anything in regards to how it's going to affect me. Maybe the Congress as a whole, it's always going to be somebody else. So I think that's sort of what happens at the federal level. It's so far away, but it is more, you see it on the news. It comes out, people are talking. You can see who's being represented and who's getting in front of the news cameras and who's running legislation and who's talking about stuff. And at least at that level, you can see who's actually doing things on your behalf, who's arguing on your behalf, who's articulating the issues on your behalf. And that's super critical. And when you see that happening and they're not doing that, you should do something about that. And it could be research. Likely it's going to be a yard sign or somebody that you know is going to be voting for somebody. But the complaints against Nancy Pelosi are wild. She's voted in every 2 years. There's a reason why Congress is 2 years, because they want you to be accountable to the people. They want you to be accountable to the people. So if you do anything bad, the worst you could do is 2 years. So you get voted in and you're terrible. You can only do 2 years of damage to your area, to your state, to your nation, right? There's a reason for that, because if you don't like them, your memory's going to be short. 2 years is a good amount of time to see if you can actually do a good job or if you're not good. Nancy Pelosi gets reelected over and over. People that are talking about term limits, it's like, just vote them out. Just run a good campaign and vote them out. You have the power.
Yeah.
But we've convinced ourselves that we're powerless. We don't have power. The most important power that you have as an American citizen is the ability for you to vote. It is the pinnacle of power. It's the most important thing that you have. So that vote getting stolen, that vote getting corrupted, that vote not being counted, that vote being diluted by giving it to people that are not citizens is a big deal. You should care about that happening. You should care about your accessibility to be able to vote. You should care about who actually has access to do that, to influence your communities. That should be a very big deal to people. They should pay attention to that. The state level, which is fascinating, which is really the feeder for either governor or for the federal government. I think that should be the feeding.
Yeah.
If we're going to go into levels,
Right.
I think that state level should be feeding that. It doesn't have to, but it is super helpful. It's just one of those things where you don't have to hire somebody with experience, but my goodness, it's going to be such an easier transition into new leadership when that person has any background in that area that you're hiring them for. So when it comes to the state level, I would say if they have been at any other level of government, whether it's school board, city council, county, super valuable to getting into the state level. Probably, ideally, I would say that that's going to be in the most basic sense, it's your county supervisor, because they are constantly lobbying the state. And they have all types in California, they have all types of mechanisms for that. So I would say ideally, that is a good training ground for someone that's going to run for state level county supervisor. It is the most traditional. Now in Redding, for some reason, and only in Shasta County, that has not been the case. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. More council members run for state office than county supervisors. But the way that it's designed, what makes sense and why you see it in every other county in California is a lot of times they come out of the counties. And mostly that's because they get so much experience lobbying that they can catch a vision for it. They can say like, oh, wait, I can do that. I understand how that works. I don't feel like there's such a learning curve. I can figure that out and I can do it. I think where you get into trouble is where, as Republicans, we say things like, we don't want a politician. We want somebody from the community. We want somebody who has no knowledge of how this works, who has no connections to how these things work. And we just think that they're going to go there and fight for us. But they don't have any idea what they're doing. And once they get there, more often than not, they just want to stay there. Like it's often said in Sacramento that people that are there, and it's the best job they've ever had. It's the best job they've ever had. They have staff. They have people that do everything for them. They're important. They're making decisions all of the time. They don't have to explain it because somebody writes a script for what it is that they're going to say. And it's a good gig. It's a really good gig. It's a good gig. However, we're in a supermajority. And so I think the public needs to decide, what does an opposition party look like? Because you're not co-authoring things.
Right.
You're not designing the state with the left and the right because you need each other to get things passed. That doesn't exist. There's no balance. It's completely off balance. So your only role is to communicate to the public why these policies are not good ideas and why these policies harm people. And what is the data to show that policy has not worked? It's not going to work. And in order to do that, you really have to understand a lot of how it works, what the mechanisms of that are, and you have to be able to articulate that. But we often, especially in the North, want to pick people that we think represent us that are not well-versed, understanding, or know what it is that they're talking about. And what you naturally get is people that are taking pictures in the role but aren't actually doing the role. So when you think of people in the state government of California, who comes to mind? Like who's on the news fighting and arguing and, making attention to the crazy laws that are being passed in California?
I can't think of anyone in...
Nobody?
That I see fighting vocally.
So you're not even seeing that on the news?
No.
So the news that you get here in Redding is not actually showing that. And the national news you get isn't talking about California.
I wouldn't say I see a lot from our area of why these are bad. I mean, I probably could go to the sites to find it.
No, but I'm just saying, like, on the news, who's putting themselves on the news, putting forth legislation to combat issues that are happening, or who do you see setting forth legislation in California that is being discussed?
I mean, mostly Democrats.
Well, of course. And they're terrible. So for me, I would say Carl DeMaio. I see him getting up there and arguing on the floor about how terrible bills are. Have you seen that?
I have not seen anyone on the floor arguing.
Shannon Grove.
Okay, Shannon Grove I've seen.
Yeah, so Shannon Grove making it criminal.
Yes.
For people to actually solicit children for sex.
Yes, I've seen that.
So she had to go, it took her 8 years to get these two bills passed. One, to make it illegal for somebody to purchase a child.
Right.
And then make it illegal for somebody to sell that child to be purchased. Crazy that it takes 8 years to get that passed. Crazy that, and by the way, only because Newsom got involved to make sure that it would pass, because the committees wouldn't even push it forward. So, like, crazy stuff. So I can think of Bill Asaley, who was there last year, who's now a U.S. attorney. He's making a fuss of things. He's putting forth bills that he knows are going to get rejected, but he's talking about them. I mean, there have been a handful. Kevin Kiley, before he was in the Congress, he would run bills all the time. And I think those are the types of people that the public looks at and says, okay, you're fighting for the things
those are good examples
that matter to me. And what's crazy is that there are, I don't even know now, what do we have, 18 in the Assembly and maybe like 10 in the Senate that are Republicans. The fact that you don't know every single, that's it.
Yeah, that's
28
real.
People of 120, and you don't know their
No,
names?
that's real. That's real. I honestly wish I knew everyone's name, even with parties that of a Democratic Party. I wish I knew more about everyone involved.
Sure.
Isn't that the truth? But I think I get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
That's the crux of it as a community member. You're wanting to do your best, put your best foot forward, elect or hire the right people, and you get into the go to vote, and it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And then you have to track down qualifications, and you get lost in it. And so you're like, I just defer to the color scheme, or you said, I defer to who I trust, or I defer to this conversation about something that's not related to their actual job that they're running for, because I know if I can trust them in this area, or if we align in this area, then surely we must align in every area.
Yeah.
Surely we must align. And so it's it's like cognitive dissonance, where it just settles your mind and brings peace to your decision. I'm giving myself permission decision in my laziness, I'm going to call it that for myself, to not investigate fully and really ask hard questions because all of a sudden the nuances arrive. It's not as black and white, and I'm left with the reality that this is way more complicated than I'm willing to admit.
So then what happens is the moment that they do something you don't like, which happens quickly, that's it. It's over.
The mechanism for us to hire or elect is a ballot. So that's where the names go of the choices that we have.
Yeah. When you get your ballot, you get your voter guide and your ballot.
Correct.
So do you just read your voter guide?
I read my voter guide. Well, I would say maybe I'm a little bit different than the average. I don't want to compare myself, but I tend to do a little bit of a deeper dive just because I'm a nerd like that. I care more about politics than I would say the average citizen who doesn't engage as deeply as I do. I care deeply with local, but then once we get into state, it gets a little fuzzier. We get into the judges, and I'm like, oh Lord, help me. And then we get federal. I'm more engaged, but just because I love watching the debate. I mean, I'm all in on those. That's just give me all that.
Yeah.
So my questions then come down to what you're suggesting is that we're operating in our mechanism of voting by not engaging on looking at who has prior experience, right? Or who.
Well, it's one of those things that we basically say if you have been elected before, you're eliminated. Because when it's a new position, not if they're already in office, because statistically, I know what people are going to do if somebody is an incumbent. They're going to vote for them again. When it comes to those issues that are outside of you, so state and Congress, you're just going to keep voting for the same people. That's statistically what's going to happen.
That's what the majority
That's what's going to
does,
happen.
yeah.
But when it comes to local, which is really your farm team, which is really where people need to be developed,
right?
And then where you can actually pay attention to what it is that you have the opportunity to pay attention. You have the opportunity to hear them.
Exactly.
You have the opportunity for them to explain themselves.
See how they lead.
Yeah, you can see what happens and what principles they actually stand on, or if they have any principles at all, because they'll tell you, oh, this is my principle, this is my value, but then they do the opposite.
Right.
And there has to be some accountability for that, at least in your own mind.
Which should be you're disqualified or
you should just take note of it, because it is possible that that you don't like the other person that's running for whatever reason. I just think that when it comes to our electeds, there are certain things that we have said. You could do research. You could do I don't have to tell you how to look for somebody to vote. But I can tell you there are places where we have believed something that isn't true. And I want to correct that. And what we have believed that isn't true is that if you have experience, that makes you politician as a bad word, and it makes you part of the establishment, or it's like, no, you don't actually know that. Now you actually have the opportunity to know what they stand for. You actually have that opportunity to listen. The best way to know who to vote for is go talk to them.
Yeah.
Is to go and listen, or just listen to them talk, because people can, in very short amount of time, tell you some things that sound good, but when they have to explain them, when they have to give you like their whole rationale, they can't read it from a page. They have to explain it to you. So if you can go to a debate, if you go and see who's reading their answers, because it's crafted, and because you want to make sure you don't mess it up, versus those people that can just tell you, or you can talk to them, or you can email them and get a response and call and have a coffee date, especially if it's local. You have full access to these people at the local level. Now, is it possible that there's a one-off, or somebody who was in this industry and then they went there and then they did a good job? Sure, that is possible. But what is not possible is you thinking that you're going to get an advocate for you in the season that you're in, if an advocate is what's needed. And in the season we're in California, the people that you actually need there are there that have to articulate your values, have to communicate what it is that we want, and be for something that is actually advancing this cause, because people have to be persuaded. That's how our system works. You're not just going to say like, well, if you don't like that, vote for me. It's like, no, I'm going to persuade you why this is the better policy. I'm going to persuade you why you should trust into this idea, and that this idea will have this steps and it'll get you there. Part of that whole discussion and debate is what should be happening in media or social media. It should be more speech, more discussion.
Louder, more
So when your
proactive.
representatives don't speak, when your representatives aren't out there talking about it, they're talking about themselves, or they're talking about maybe something that they're doing that isn't what the people said matters to them. The people matter about the cost of living in California. We care about the cost of insurance here. We care about crime. We care about all the things. If they're not carrying bills that are addressing any of that, even if you know that they're going to fail, and getting out there and saying, these are our values, this is what we stand for, this is the stuff that needs to happen. If it isn't happening now, the moment that power does shift, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? They're going to get along? They're going to get along So we are hiring people to get along with people. It is just such a low value right now when it comes to the situation that we're in California. People are leaving. You can't afford to be here. I can't afford to be here. Why would we stay if we don't have a plan for the future and a hope for the future and hope for something that can actually change? Well, it means that we actually have to look at who we're hiring for these jobs and do a better job of hiring better people that actually know what the issues are, can articulate those issues, have principles.
Yeah.
And that are not just easily persuaded by being liked. I mean, people pleasing, I would say, is the biggest disease or kryptonite that you see in politics today. Those people that are going along to get along, that will be influenced by whatever lobby group comes and talks to them last, that can't articulate why they're voting a certain way, but just saying, no, I like this, and so I'm doing it. It's like, no, you can't just be the no person, the yes person. You have to be the why. You got to be the why person, because the public needs something to follow. The public needs a policy prescription that they can say, no, I'm actually for this thing, and I want to move forward with this idea. We should be refining oil in California. We are the cleanest oil that could be produced anywhere. So paying another country to produce dirty oil and then putting it on a tanker, driving it to California, which puts out tons of emissions, is hypocrisy, when we could be doing it in our own state, transporting it in our own state, and actually fueling our economy and fueling the growth of our own state. It's terrible that it isn't happening, and if your representatives aren't talking about that, your representatives aren't fighting for that, then they're obviously not fighting for you, and they should be fired.